We thought we picked all greens, and then there happened to be a few poisonous flowers mixed in with those.
Making life below zero. Yes! Bring it on.
Mixed in with those, and I happened to eat them, and I got really sick. And after that, me and the girls started watching.
Agnes Hailstone once vanished, leaving life below zero fans to deal with questions that remain unsolved. She had won their hearts with her tenacity and talent. However, there came a moment when it appeared as though she had disappeared. Was it just a decision to withdraw more into the woods, or was there a more serious motive? Come along as we reveal the specifics of Life Below Zero's Agnes Hailstone's fate. The Silent Storm. Agnes Hailstone's real story. Agnes Hailstone was more than just a TV personality. Among the most notable figures, she gained recognition for her bravery and tenacity in Life Below Zero, in harsh Arctic conditions, as well as her strong Inupiaq heritage. However, over time, numerous admirers became aware of her abrupt absences and the quiet surrounds her private life. What became of this resilient woman who, armed only with a rifle and decades of experience, once confronted the wild head-on? When Agnes Hailstone was absent from Life Below Zero for the first time in 2020, the audience suddenly felt empty. Agnes's constant presence for years, tracking moose through fresh snow, gutting fish by hand, and raising her daughters had turned into the emotional center of the program. Therefore, when she didn't show up in that particular episode, the fan community was shaken with worry. Overnight, social media threads exploded with inquiries. How is Agnes doing? As well as, what prevented her from shooting this week? The fact that no formal announcement just exacerbated the anxiety. Admirers who had come to witness her unwavering resolve and soft knowledge were left perplexed, as though a vital component of the show's heart had stopped beating. At this stage, the producers did not provide an explanation for Agnes's absence, and that silence only made the rumors more loudly. Some questioned whether she had been stranded at camp by a hazardous polar blizzard, making it impossible to travel safely. Others were concerned that she might have been hurt, most likely somewhere far from medical assistance. Some of the responses varied from hopeful prayers to more worried theories, and some even whispered about health issues or family emergencies. Snow machine technical issues or unexpected illnesses. Without verifying, each rumor held weight. As everyone in the town became alarmed about Agnes's fate, their hearts felt heavy. Although there were still rumors that she was leaving, she thankfully made a triumphant comeback in the following episode, standing erect before the camera as she does when every Arctic winter arrives. When she returned, it was a huge relief for those who had grown to respect her. Knowing she was safe, fans were happy to see her again. Well, just a few years prior, the Hailstone had been put to the test in another sinister chapter. The tenacity of the family. In the year 2001, Chip Hailstone encountered significant accusations that startled fans and other cast members. Charges of making untrue statements and a quick court process resulted from his perjury concerning situations involving his children. Supporters watched in shock as the judge sentenced him to 15 months in prison, when he stopped being a hunter and became an inmate. Agnes and their daughters were heartbroken by the news, who abruptly departed without their father or lover. Their suffering was subtly captured by the cameras. The silence of their house without Chip's laughter, the empty coffee mugs on the table, and the strain in Agnes's eyes as she attempted to support her daughters every day. Now that Chip was incarcerated, Agnes had to traverse the harsh landscape and simultaneously the center of national television. She had to go hunting more frequently and split firewood twice as much, and impart all of the skills Chip once taught her girls. She had to endure a great deal of hard labor. Before daylight, they were feeding hungry stomachs, dragging heavy burdens, and fixing nets with freezing fingers. Nevertheless, Agnes managed to keep the show going in spite of the difficulties, tension, and labor required. While she acknowledged that there were times when meals tasted different without her husband around and that at times, the burden of accountability seemed too much to handle. But she persisted. When talking about her lonely nights, her voice faltered, but she wouldn't allow it to whatever emotional suffering or loneliness she was experiencing, it won. Because of her perseverance, Agnes turned tragedy into an example of perseverance, demonstrating to viewers how strength frequently dwindles before the sun rises. When word spread of Chip's incarceration and Agnes's hardships, sympathy poured in, significantly larger than the typical audience for the show. Online trending hashtags calling for his release, with unidentified people pleading with then-President Donald Trump to step in. Stories were shared by fans of how they felt inspired to give back after Life Below Zero gave them hope. Their home received care packages containing a variety of warm clothing, preserved snacks, and encouraging letters and writing. Even surrounding tiny towns hosted watching events, gatherings where money was raised for the family. By means of this goodwill rally, Agnes and her daughters found that they were not fighting this battle alone. The world outside of Arctic supported them, demonstrating how on-screen narrative may build genuine connections off-screen. The reunion was both happy and sad when Chip was eventually freed. Cameras saw Agnes rushing into his arms while their cheeks were frozen with tears. For a while, the Hailstones seemed complete once more. However, the difficulties did not go away right away. They still had to deal with re-establishing their daily schedules, mending damaged trust, and facing the social criticism that followed Chip's legal issues. However, after enduring months of adversity apart, they came to one another with fresh empathy. After learning to rely on herself, Agnes now permitted herself to rely on her husband once more. They were able to face all of their fears and uncertainties about the future together. The Hailstones managed to establish some sort of harmony between their personal suffering and the requirements of the show. Documentation of episodes shot in 221 and later years more than hunting and ice navigation. They showed peaceful times for introspection. Agnes was seen by viewers. She stopped beside a frozen river and gazed at the horizon as though she was looking for answers. They observed Chip steadying her amid a snowfall with his soft touch on her shoulder. This mixture real life and documentaries were different, since no screenplay could adequately convey the depth of her anxiety had to deal with throughout her life. During these hardships, her inexplicable absence, Chip's incarceration, considering the unrelenting hardships of living far away, Agnes Hailstone showed herself to be a silent source of strength. Her strength consisted in overcoming every adversity without regret. She never pursued pity or attention. While she was silent, she made a strong statement about the ties that bind a family together and the true cost of survival. These difficulties weren't the only difficulties Agnes encountered. There were many difficulties associated with living in such an atmosphere. In Nurvik, summer felt softer. However, it was not without its pain. There were black flies and mosquitoes everywhere. Agnes made use of improvised netting around her sleeves and over her head, yet the insects managed to get through. Her legs were covered in mosquito bite markings by most evenings. She had smoke on her person, branches to ward against insects, but even the smoke caused her to choke and damage her eyes. Going fishing in summer was just as difficult as winter hunting. In the spring, Agnes would draw lines through ice holes. However, she had to balance on slick banks in open water. Her skiff was once overturned by an unexpected gust. Her equipment spilled into the river. She picked up her knapsack, swam in her bulky clothing, and struggled back to shore against the current. She warmed herself that night by starting the tiniest fire she could. Nurvik had no hospital and only a small health clinic, therefore medical assistance was far away. Agnes had to fix the bone herself when a toddler broke an arm after falling from a roof. She used fabric strips to wrap the splints and applied cold to prevent swelling. If a fever became excessively high, she monitored each child's breath while administering doses of antibiotics she had purchased by mail. She called a nurse hundreds of miles away on stormy nights using a satellite phone. She detailed symptoms while her fingers trembled over the keys. When a wound was at risk of infection, every second mattered. Beside her girls, she lay awake, ready to offer sips of hot tea or warm blankets while paying attention to every breath. A worldwide pandemic in the year 2000 forced the cancellation of winter supplies and grounded flights. Agnes heated snow to make water and retrieved salmon cans from a secret stockpile. When hunger in Inupiaq, she uttered words of optimism as the cold threatened to overtake them, training her girls to recite the hymn that meant, "Be strong," in the old tongue. Every stanza served as a connection to forebears who had endured comparable adversities centuries earlier. She was always worried about money. Selling furs and smoked fish to Anchorage purchasers brought scant consolation when delivery prices skyrocketed. A fire at the smokehouse one winter caused it to go bankrupt. Their limited supply. For days, Agnes observed as racks of drying fish were devoured by fire. Her lungs were pricked by the sharp smoke. The concept of insurance was far off. Rebuilding required long days of cutting more wood, stacking more racks, and hoping for clear skies. Survival expeditions used to be paid for by tourists, but they were cancelled when the economy faltered. Agnes maintained notes by candlelight, identifying every cost. However, what was Agnes's life like before the limelight? Before the spotlight, a life carved by ice. Agnes was already surviving the hostile Alaskan environment before cameras followed her every step. Her early years were spent in the isolated settlement of Nurvik, close to the Kobuk River. Continuous survival, in which hunting was a need rather than a skill. Her strong bond with the natural world and her ancestors' customs shaped her into a person who could overcome nearly insurmountable obstacles. Few outsiders ever witnessed the location where Agnes Hailstone's life began. Every day is a test of will in this small community on the Arctic Circle's border, where winter lasts for the majority of the year. Alaska's Nurvik sits on the banks of the Kobuk River, 19 miles north of that invisible border. In this case, in temperatures that can plunge far below zero, fewer than 700 people manage to make a life. Agnes was born on June 14th into this planet, which was shaped by wind and ice. 17 and 22. Hurricane Agnes, which devastated sections of the United States just weeks prior to her arrival, inspired her parents' choice of name. The effects of that storm demonstrated how hostile the terrain and surroundings would become for Agnes. Agnes was a part of a long-standing tradition from the moment she breathed. These frigid wastelands were the ancestral home of the Inupiat people, of which she was a member. Over many generations, her ancestors hunted caribou over the boundless tundra long ago. How to read the tiny indicators of wildlife and weather while fishing the freezing river by torchlight. Each instruction they imparted turned into a lifeline. When Agnes was able to walk, she had already saw older repairing make traps and nets. When she was able to speak, she was inquiring about how to determine the color of the rocks, which rocks to break for fire, and where wolf tracks indicated danger, and river ice. When she was younger, curiosity was not just encouraged, it was a vital aspect of their existence, and a way to survive. Agnes could not have been prepared for the classroom at home by any local school. Agnes discovered how to quickly gut her catch certain strokes and to hang fish in driftwood smokehouses. During the fall, When caribou, she and her siblings went when herds thundered across the tundra, indicating the impending frost. To put nets in the snow. She discovered that one should never take food for granted. Every year, her intimate bond with the land deepened. She was taught that caring for others was more important for survival than simply capturing an animal. For each other. She was able to navigate open water in a small boat by the time she was 10. Find far-off flocks of geese against a bleak sky and stay warm throughout lengthy nights. Agnes became into more than just a survivor. She came to represent the tenacity of her people. She learned how to use tools that had been handed down through the generations. The rifle of Mosin Nagant became a part of her everyday life after being created in the millions. The Ulu knife did the same. Every little girl was taught how to use an Inuit tool. This information was required. It was necessary. It was essential to Arctic life. Her community's daughters were taught how to use weapons, manufacture clothes, and prepare meat at a young age. For hunting and protection. These customs were transmitted from elders, carrying on a lengthy teaching cycle that enabled them to flourish in the world's coldest regions. Agnes became a mother for the first time when she was 19. Iriktak, her oldest daughter, was born in 1991, solidifying Agnes's position as more than just a native child, but as a manual for future generations. She was aware even then that having a daughter in Nunavik would need different instruction than typical mothers. She started instructing Iriktak how to use a thin pole to test river ice, how to track ptarmigans across white fields, and how to identify a nearby herd's faint, faraway sound. When Iriktak was able to walk, she was able to carry a little bundle of firewood. And by the time she turned 1 year old, she understood to grab the thick mittens that Agnes would place next to the door. Agnes met the guy who would become her husband soon after the birth of her daughter. Hailstone, Chip. He had traveled to Alaska for a brief vacation from Kalispell, Montana. The year 1969 saw the birth of Chip Hailstone in Kalispell, Montana. His formative years was influenced by the outdoors and the natural world. Since he was a little lad, Chip has spent numerous learning how to hunt, fish, and create tools for hours. Daniel and Mary Hailstone, his parents, showed him how to survive without food. They taught him the importance of perseverance, hard effort, and reverence for the planet. He didn't grow up around populated areas or large cities. Rather, Chip was raised in an environment full with forests, rivers, and wildlife. Because of these early encounters, he had a strong affection for the wild, which subsequently served as his compass. He was so enthralled with the atmosphere there that he never returned. Following Agnes's heartbreaking previous marriage, Chip and Agnes were married in 1998. Their common adversity served to forge their bond: frozen rivers, wind-blown tents, and headlamp-prepared meals on icy terrain. Agnes and Chip were raising 7 kids on the same stretch by the early 2000s of the riverbed. Each birthday brought a new gift, such as a tiny rifle for ptarmigan hunting, a sled for firewood, or a set of steel traps for beavers. Nobody in Nunavik inquired for video games or toy automobiles. Each child instead learned to earn their food. The youngest, Sitka, once sat on Agnes' knee while she patiently demonstrated how to gut a fish for him. On her 9th birthday, their second daughter Katan proudly laid a snare at the edge of a willow thicket. By the time they were teenagers, Katan and Iriktak could traverse river currents and construct makeshift shelters in case of unexpected storms. The season seldom affected Agnes's daily schedule. She would manually break river ice in the spring, creating passageways for fish to swim upstream. Fish that would keep her family alive throughout the protracted freeze. She collected wild berries in the summer and dried them for use in the winter. Hauling moose was a part of autumn. Carcasses from the tundra in the distance. She also led her family on dog sled runs during the winter. Her hands were scarred by innumerable tasks, ranging from small burn scars to faded lines and a fractured knuckle. Agnes never left Alaska's boundaries in all those years since she had no intention of doing so. Her roots were too deep. Her family tree could be traced back to when her great-grandfather-great-grandmother originally settled on that riverside, following old traditions that were not visible on a map. Every tree, rock, and nook and cranny of the Kobuk River seemed familiar. However, in spite of this unbroken relation to history, the exhibition Life Below Zero was a knock on the door of modern life. The Hailstones and Life Below Zero. Agnes soon noticed that the cabin's feeble lights were powered by a modest generator. Together with a satellite dish that broadcasts news from the outside world. When an experienced film team showed up, Agnes agreed in 2013 to document life in Nurvik, but only under one stipulation. Since she was aware of the dangers of sharing her world, they respect her family's privacy and struggles. She established explicit guidelines: no cameras in the girls' bedrooms, no recording during storms, no interviews while grieving was still ongoing. She didn't want sympathy or recognition. She desired for visitors to see the reality. Residing here required all of a person's wits, bravery, and consideration could call forth. She merely wished to offer an honest look into her life. She had no desire for stardom. Life Below Zero has always been acknowledged as a reality television program that chronicles people's distance from Alaskan cities. To make ends meet, these individuals hunt, fish, and use nature to satisfy their requirements. The BBC Studios produced program airs on National Geographic. It describes how these resilient men and women deal with difficult obstacles on a daily basis and endure frigid temperatures. They rely on traditional methods rather than contemporary luxuries of surviving. The program teaches viewers how difficult, yet lovely, in the woods life can be. It displays genuine human strength and energy, and is unvarnished and honest. The Hailstones were viewed by fans as strong, hardworking individuals when Life Below Zero first started broadcasting. Few understood that Agnes was bearing responsibilities that would have crushed many behind every stage. As part of her job, she had to teach her girls how to deal with loss as well as how to build a net. A plane might be days away when a youngster became ill, or when a winter hunt failed. When elders died and storms ripped at the roof of their cabin, she helped them deal with their loss.